I'm starting off with a really rough sketch and a butterfly drawing that I drew off camera. The butterfly actually started as a doodle, which sparked the idea, float like a butterfly. I like to work in full screen mode for space and flexibility, especially ever since I switched from a 24-inch iMac screen to a 15-inch MacBook Pro screen. Before I refine the sketch, I'm just going to resize and move things around a bit. I'm trying to figure out the layout. After I draw my guides, I'm going to make sure that the snap is turned off so that when I draw, my brush strokes won't stick or snap to my guides. Here I'm just writing this word out to get an idea of the X height, and I'm getting a feel for letter shapes, letter spacing, stroke thickness, the overall look of the lettering. Just trying to figure out what I want it to look like, basically. I know I want the lettering to have a modern, loose, calligraphic look. So right now I'm just trying to get down the skeleton, and then I'll go back in and do a refined sketch. Even though this is just a sketch, I want the letter spacing and shapes to be correct, or as close to correct as possible, because I'm going to use the refined sketch as my guide for inking. Digital inking, of course. It's a little weird to share artwork as it's coming together because it's not looking amazing right off the bat. It takes some time massaging and figuring out. That's what practice is. You use your eraser, hit the undo button, and keep going. Then pretty soon it'll all come together. For sketching, I'm using one of my pencil brushes from my Doodle Brushes set, which you can find here. I apologize for forgetting to hit record for the beginning of this sketch, but you'll get to see me sketch again soon when I do the sketch for Butterfly. So here I'm doing another refined sketch, but this time it's going to be even more precise because I'm sketching the thin strokes and the thicks. I'm using two of my pencil brushes from my Doodle Brushes set. The first one is the flat pencil shader 1, and it's sized at 15 pixels. And then the second one for the thicks, I'm using the pencil shader 2 at its regular size, 35 pixels. If you ever feel the need to zoom out, zoom out. It's important to take zoom out breaks to see what the art looks like as a whole. On a new layer, I'm going to begin inking. I'm using my inky detailer brush from my Photoshop lettering digital ink brush set, which you can find here. This brush has very defined textured edges, which gives it an inky look. If you want less texture in your brush strokes, but still want that inky edged look, try using one of the monoline ink brushes. Maybe number 7 would be good. When I'm lettering, sometimes I like to rotate my artboard for more comfort. This is just like tilting your paper when you're writing. I'm also making sure that my elbow is on a flat surface for stability and that I have enough hand to elbow space for sweeping gestures. I'm taking my time while drawing each letter. I noticed that when I get impatient and I try to go too fast, that's when I lose control of the letter shape and it just gets ugly and I have to keep doing it over and over again. So if you ever notice that you can't get your letter to look good according to your eyes and your own idea, try slowing down and taking your time with it. On a new layer, I'm going to draw my thick downstrokes with my 72 ppi ink brush. I switched to my 300 ppi ink brush and decreased the size one time with the left bracket key. I'm using this brush instead because it has more texture, or it has larger texture edges than the 72 ppi brush. And I feel that it matches very well with the inky detailer brush. Please excuse any lagging if you see it. Sometimes when I do screen recordings while working in Photoshop with my Cintiq, my laptop starts to lag. So I just did my shortcut trick there again. I wanted to turn the E and the A over a bit, so I selected them both with the lasso tool and hit Command-Shift-J to get them on their own layer. The point of moving the objects to their own layer rather than selecting them and nudging them with the selection on the same layer is that I'm avoiding deterioration of the pixels that I drew. Moving a layer doesn't affect the pixels you draw, but moving a selection of the pixels while they're still on that same layer, it does pixelate or de-sharpen your pixels. You'll notice this especially if you move it enough times. So in that case, if I do move it while on the same layer, then I'll just have to sharpen that letter. I explain it better in my lettering class. So if you want to check that out, it's on Skillshare. I'll put the link down in the description box. A little trick I like to use whenever I want to seamlessly thicken a stroke is load the layer selection with Command-click on the layer's thumbnail and nudge the selection's outline with the arrow keys to the side, to the right, or the left. Then brush into the empty selected area. Hopefully that makes sense, but again, I explain this better in my class. Part of making sure your letters are cohesive and look like they came from the same hand or are in the same family is to keep the weight of each letter the same or as close as possible. In this case, that means keeping the brush size the same for the thick strokes and then keeping the brush size the same for the thin strokes. And also applying the same amount of pressure for each stroke when you draw your letters. So it's basically like calligraphy, and you just have to control your hand and control the amount of pressure that you're putting on each downstroke. Otherwise, you just have to go back in and fix it. I placed all of my sketch layers into one group and created a merged layer, aka a stamp of the group. And I used the shortcut Command-Option-E. If you're on a PC, I think it's Control-Alt-E. So basically you select that group, Command-Option-E, and then you'll have a stamp of the group, and you can turn off the group and draw on the merged layer. This is basically a flattened duplicate of the visible layers in the group. With the duplicate, I just want to test out some different edits. I feel like the lettering is fighting with the butterfly for attention. If you work in Photoshop a lot, then you may have noticed that each time you transform something, it loses a bit of its sharpness and quality. So when I'm working with lettering or calligraphy and I want to keep the edges crisp, I'll use one of the sharpening effects to bring back its crisp edges. And usually just applying it once works, you don't need to overdo it. I'm selecting my pencil brush to do a rough sketch of the word butterfly, and it is very rough, to get an idea of the size of the letters and the overall word. I'm using the free transform tool, Command-T, to quickly resize this to my liking. And because it's just a sketch, I don't mind if it gets a little pixelated. I didn't really need the word butterfly since I have an image of it, but I really just wanted to draw the word butterfly. Since I'm working on a Cintiq and the screen is really bright, I'm changing the background color to a muted beige or a yellow toned color to diffuse the brightness and make it easier to stare at. My Cintiq is a 13-inch HD touch, and I don't have the ability to lower the brightness on it. I wish I did, but I don't. So to ease the brightness, I just darken whatever I'm looking at temporarily. I'm zooming in and rotating my page to get a more comfortable visual and a more comfortable position. Notice I'm drawing or writing a lot more slowly, carefully, and purposefully. This is the beginning stages of me refining the butterfly lettering sketch. The great thing about doing this sketch first is that you don't feel too attached, and it makes it easier to erase, redraw, chop it up, resize, and edit until you like it enough to draw the final on top. Sometimes during the sketching stage, if I notice that there are a lot of things that I want to change or try out, I'll just grab a new layer and redraw the whole sketch rather than continuing to pick apart the old sketch. If something's not working, just leave it alone and move forward because you may find something better. I'm using a copy of the words above, and I decreased the opacity so I could copy its exact angle and mimic the spacing. This just makes the sketching part go by a little quicker. I was eager to get it done so I can get to the inking part. I'm redrawing the sketch to get better letter forms, just prettier, more defined letters. It's so easy to begin sculpting or detailing when you're zoomed in so close or when you're just in the zone. A lot of people would tell you not to do that. I guess it makes sense. Don't do that. Or do it. Who cares? Here I'm unifying the letters by making them more cohesive. I'm making the angles match. I'm adjusting the space between the letters. In type design, this is called kerning. I'm making sure that the spacing between the letters match the words above, and I'm also leaving room for the thick strokes. Now I'm just going to spend some time refining the sketch and getting it to a point where I'm ready to ink it. Okay, now that I'm done with the thin strokes, I'm adding in thick strokes with my pencil shader brush. Here, I'm going in with the inky detailer brush to add some swirly swashes. When I zoom out and look at everything as a whole, sometimes I spot little areas that could use some improvement. Like this area here. I want it to look like I wrote it rather than drew it. Like calligraphy. Now back to that troublesome bee. Oh, it looks so crazy. And this was drawn like 2 years ago, and my skills have improved since then, so do not judge. When you see me zoom out and pause for a sec every once in a while, I'm comparing my butterfly lettering to the other words above, trying to make sure they look cohesive. Doing this makes me second guess and redraw the F. Butterfly is starting to look yummy. Finally, it's time to start inking the butterfly lettering, a very satisfying part of the lettering process. Starting with the thin strokes. If only I could get it right. Sometimes you gotta just go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Don't look back, just go. Get the letters down, fix them later. Go, 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 go. Now, I could use one of my more dynamic brushes that would allow me to draw thick and thin strokes all with one brush, but for this style of lettering, I want the thin strokes to have very little variance in the weight throughout the stroke. So by doing it separately, this way I can have more control of that, as well as have more control of the thick strokes. And it makes it easier to fix things if I need to. Is it me, or does it just seem like a lot of times the sketch always looks better than the inking? I don't know, but it'll get better as I continue to refine and rework. It'll get better. Keep in mind, I am not a calligrapher, nor am I trying to be. A professional calligrapher would watch this video and cringe the whole way through. They'd watch in agony. I'm an illustrator and letterer, so all of this is fine to me. Something about adding the thick strokes on just feels like such a breath of fresh air and relief. Relief that the finished art is not going to look crazy after all. But that E is hideous. Too bad I didn't realize it back then when I drew it and when I initially recorded this. Of course, looking back at this 2 or 3 years later, I can definitely see some areas that I could improve even more. But like I said, this was just for fun and practice. Take it back, I actually like the inking more than I like the sketch. Not bad. And I'm finished. Here's the finished inked artwork. I also have a variation of this with a less ornate butterfly. I haven't done anything else with this art, but I did use the butterfly as a blurring mechanism to block cuss words during my creative goals video, which was fun. People really liked that. Anywho, I'm done with this one, so stay tuned for the Sting Like a Bee art video.